A German officer shoved a pistol into his stomach. 80 enemy soldiers surrounded him. His own men were on the ground with their hands up. First Sergeant Leonard Funk had one choice: surrender or die trying. What happened next took 60 seconds and changed everything. August 27, 1916, Braddock Township, Pennsylvania. Leonard Alfred Funk Jr. was born into a working-class family. The kind of people who worked with their hands and didn't ask for much. Leonard stood 5'5", small for a man. But what he lacked in height, he made up for in heart. In June 1941, just before Pearl Harbor, 25-year-old Leonard Funk enlisted in the United States Army. War was coming. Everyone could feel it. And Funk wanted to be ready. In 1942, Funk volunteered for something new. Something dangerous. Something that paid $50 more a month. The Airborne, the Paratroopers. These were the men who jumped out of perfectly good airplanes and landed behind enemy lines with nothing but a rifle and their wits. Funk completed jump training and was assigned to Company C, 508th Parachute Infantry Regiment. The Red Devils. In 1943, the 508th shipped to England. They were attached to the 82nd Airborne Division. The famous All-Americans. Funk and his brothers spent months training. Running, jumping, preparing for the invasion everyone knew was coming. And on June 6, 1944, D-Day arrived. The night before the invasion, Funk and the 508th loaded into C-47 transport planes. Their mission was to drop inland, secure the western flank, and hold the river crossings near the Murderate River. The plan was simple. The execution was chaos. German anti-aircraft fire tore through the sky. Tracer rounds lit up the darkness. Planes were hit, men were scattered. Funk landed nearly 40 miles inland from where he was supposed to be, alone, disoriented, behind enemy lines. But Funk didn't panic. He gathered a group of 18 scattered paratroopers. Some from the 82nd, some from the 101st, it didn't matter. They were Americans, and they had a job to do. Funk led them on a 20-mile march through enemy territory. He scouted ahead himself, refused to let anyone else take point. 3 scouts had already been killed. Funk wouldn't let another man die in his place. For days they moved at night, fought during the day. Dodged German patrols, crossed enemy checkpoints. And miraculously, all 18 men made it back to friendly lines. Not a single casualty. For this, Leonard Funk was awarded the Silver Star. But he was just getting started. September 17, 1944, Operation Market Garden, the largest airborne operation in history up to that point. The plan was to seize key bridges in the Netherlands and open a path into Germany. The 508th jumped into Holland near Vauxhall. Their job was to protect incoming glider forces. carrying reinforcements and supplies. But as the glider circled to land, German anti-aircraft guns opened fire. 20mm flak cannons tore the gliders apart. Men were dying in the sky. Funk didn't wait for orders. He grabbed 3 men and led a patrol straight toward the guns. 3 20mm flak cannons, fully crewed. Funk and his 3-man team attacked. He drove off the security forces around the guns, then led the assault on the gun crews themselves. 20 German gunners were killed. More were wounded. The flak guns fell silent. The gliders landed safely. Hundreds of lives saved. For this action, Funk was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross, the second highest award for valor in the United States military. But Leonard Funk still wasn't done. January 29, 1945, Holzheim, Belgium. The Battle of the Bulge was winding down, but the fighting was still brutal. Company C of the 508th had been fighting for weeks. They'd advanced 15 miles through waist-deep snow, driving snowstorms, and relentless German resistance. Now they stood at the edge of Holzheim, a small Belgian town still held by the Germans. The company executive officer was hit, killed. First Sergeant Funk immediately took command. But he had a problem. Company C was undermanned, exhausted, low on ammunition. They didn't have enough combat troops to take the town. So Funk did what Funk always did. He improvised. He went back to company headquarters and gathered every man he could find. Clerks, cooks, supply guys, radio man. None of them were trained infantry. But Funk turned them into soldiers. He organized this makeshift platoon, combined them with the 3rd platoon, and led the assault on Holzheim. German artillery shells screamed down. Machine gun fire raked the snow. But Funk pushed forward. House by house, room by room. In less than an hour, they'd cleared 15 houses, captured 30 Germans, without suffering a single American casualty. Another American unit joined the fight. Together, they swept through the rest of Holzheim. By the end of the day, they'd captured over 80 German soldiers. Funk detailed 4 men to guard the prisoners in the yard of a nearby house. Then he and the rest of the unit went back into the town to make sure every building was clear. That's when everything went wrong. While Funk was gone, a German patrol infiltrated the area. About 20 soldiers, all wearing white winter camouflage capes. They looked just like American troops. The 4 American guards didn't realize what was happening until it was too late. The Germans overpowered them, released the 80 prisoners, and prepared to attack the rest of Company C from behind. Leonard Funk walked right into the middle of it. He'd been checking another building when he came around the corner. He expected to see his 4 guards watching the prisoners. Instead, he saw over 100 German soldiers, armed, angry, ready to fight, and his 4 Americans on the ground with their hands behind their heads. A German officer stepped forward. He shoved a machine pistol into Funk's stomach. "Surrender," he ordered in broken English. Funk looked around. He was surrounded, outnumbered more than 80 to 1. His Thompson submachine gun was slung over his shoulder. If he tried to fight, he'd be dead in seconds. But Leonard Funk had never surrendered in his life. And he wasn't about to start now. Funk nodded slowly. He began to unsling his Thompson, moving carefully, as if he was surrendering. The German officer relaxed slightly. That was his mistake. In one explosive motion, Funk swung the Thompson up and pulled the trigger. The submachine gun roared. 45 caliber rounds tore through the German officer. Funk kept firing, sweeping the barrel across the crowd of stunned Germans. At the same time, he screamed at the top of his lungs. "Grab their weapons, fight." The 4 American guards dove for the nearest German rifles. Chaos erupted. Germans scrambled for cover. Americans opened fire. Funk emptied his magazine, reloaded, kept shooting. In 60 seconds, it was over. 21 Germans lay dead. 20 more were wounded. The rest threw down their weapons and surrendered. All of them, over 80 prisoners, recaptured by 5 Americans, led by a 5'5" paratrooper from Pennsylvania, who refused to quit. When the rest of Company C arrived, they couldn't believe what they were seeing. Funk standing in the middle of a pile of spent brass casings. Germans on the ground everywhere. The rest with their hands up. One of the soldiers asked Funk what happened. Funk just shrugged. "They tried to take my prisoners," he said. "I disagreed." Word of Funk's action spread through the 82nd Airborne like wildfire, then through the entire army. Newspapers back home picked up the story. The paratrooper who single-handedly killed or captured over 100 enemy soldiers in 60 seconds. On September 5, 1945, in Washington, D.C., President Harry S. Truman presented Leonard Funk with the Medal of Honor. The citation read, in part, "First Sergeant Funk, by his gallant, intrepid actions, by his courage and resourcefulness, prevented the recapture of his company by the enemy, and saved many of his comrades from capture or death. Leonard Funk became one of the most decorated paratroopers in World War II. Medal of Honor, Distinguished Service Cross, Silver Star, Bronze Star, 3 Purple Hearts." He jumped into Normandy on D-Day, fought through Operation Market Garden, survived the Battle of the Bulge, and crossed the Rhine into Germany. When the war ended, Funk left the Army. He went back to Pennsylvania, got a job with the Veterans Administration in Pittsburgh. For the next 27 years, he worked helping other veterans, the men who'd come home broken from war. Funk never talked much about what he'd done. He married his wife Gertrude. They had 2 daughters. He lived a quiet, normal life. In 1972, Funk retired from the VA. He spent his final years in McKeesport, Pennsylvania, just a few miles from where he'd been born. On November 20th, 1992, Leonard Funk died of cancer. He was 76 years old. He was buried at Arlington National Cemetery with full military honors. A company of paratroopers stood at attention. A bugler played taps. The flag was folded and presented to his family. This is what courage looks like. Not the kind that comes from size or strength, but the kind that comes from heart. Leonard Funk was 5'5", but he fought like a giant. When the German officer shoved that pistol into his stomach, Funk had every reason to surrender. He was outnumbered 80-1. Surrounded, outgunned, no one would have blamed him for giving up. But Leonard Funk wasn't built that way. He saw his men on the ground, his brothers, his soldiers, and he made a choice. Fight or die trying. In 60 seconds, he changed everything. 21 enemies dead, 20 wounded, 80 recaptured. And every one of his men saved. That's not just bravery. That's legendary. If you want to hear more stories of American heroes who refused to surrender, hit subscribe. These men deserve to be remembered.